Whispers of Blackwater. The musty scent of canvas and worn leather filled Maya's garage. Headlamps were tested, ropes coiled with practiced ease, and carabiners clipped with satisfying clicks. Chloe, bouncing on the balls of her feet, double-checked the first aid kit for the 10th time. Seriously, guys, are we sure we have enough antiseptic wipes? Blackwater's crawling with, you know. She shuddered dramatically. Ben, ever the pragmatist, consulted the tattered map spread across the hood of Maya's Jeep. Chloe, relax. We're prepared. And besides, the rumors are probably just that. Rumors, old miners' tales to scare off kids. He adjusted his glasses, a sliver of doubt flickering in his eyes despite his confident tone. Maya slammed the tailgate shut. All right, gear check complete. Let's roll. Blackwater awaits. Her voice was laced with an excitement that mirrored her own. This trip had been months in the making. Blackwater Caves, a forbidden jewel whispered about in hushed tones by the local caving community. Unmapped, unpredictable, and supposedly haunted. Perfect. The drive was long, the asphalt ribbon thinning until it devolved into a gravel track barely wider than the Jeep itself. The landscape transformed, the cheerful farmland giving way to brooding forests that choked the sunlight. The air grew heavy, thick with the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves. As they bumped along the final stretch, an oppressive silence descended. Even Chloe's usual chatter faded. Finally, they arrived. The entrance to Blackwater wasn't a dramatic gash in the earth, but a subtle depression, almost swallowed by the relentless vegetation. Twisted branches clawed at the opening, like skeletal fingers guarding a secret. A sign, riddled with bullet holes and barely legible, warned of the dangers within. Charming, Chloe muttered, her earlier bravado replaced by a visible unease. Ben cleared his throat. Let's just stick to the plan, mark our path, stay together, and turn back at the first sign of trouble. Maya, already halfway to the entrance, glanced back, a mischievous glint in her eye. Where's the fun in that? Sheriff Walker watched them from the rise overlooking the cave entrance. He recognized the Jeep, had seen it parked at the gas station in town earlier. 3 young, eager faces, radiating an unsettling mix of excitement and naivety. He knew where they were headed, Blackwater. He'd warned kids off that place for years, told them the stories, the whispers of disappearances that clung to the air like the perpetual damp. No bodies ever found, no explanations, just gone. He hadn't believed the old tales himself. Not at first. He'd chalked it up to inexperienced hikers getting lost, or worse, running afoul of moonshiners back in the day. But the sheer number of unsolved cases, the unsettling consistency of the circumstances, it gnawed at him. He remembered Sarah Jenkins, a college student who'd vanished 10 years ago, her car found abandoned near Blackwater, keys still in the ignition. And old man Hemlock, who swore he saw something unnatural near the cave entrance just days before he was found dead in his rocking chair, eyes wide with terror. Walker sighed, the West Virginia wind whipping around him. He couldn't stop them, not without probable cause. And what was he supposed to say? Don't go in there, kids, because reasons? He knew the lure of Blackwater, the irresistible pull of the unknown. He felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. He just hoped these 3 wouldn't become another unsolved case file gathering dust on his desk. He watched until they disappeared into the mouth of the cave, the darkness swallowing them whole, into the darkness. The squeeze was tighter than they'd anticipated. Ben went first, wriggling through the narrow cleft in the rock face, the beam of his headlamp jittering wildly against the rough-hewn walls. Almost got it. He grunted, then with a final push disappeared into the darkness. Clear, his muffled voice echoed back, but cozy. Next was Liam, who went through with surprising ease, his lithe frame seemingly built for such tight spaces. Then Maya, who hesitated at the entrance, the cool, damp air emanating from the cave, sending a shiver down her spine. "You okay?" Liam asked, his face a concerned blur in the dim light. "Yeah, just claustrophobic for a second," she admitted, forcing a smile. She ducked her head and followed, the rock scraping against her backpack. A moment later, she was through, standing in a small chamber, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and something indefinable, something ancient. 3 beams of light danced across the cavern walls, illuminating a wonderland of geological artistry. Stalactites dripped from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls, and stalagmites rose from the floor in fantastical shapes, some meeting to form slender, fluted columns. The silence was profound, broken only by the occasional drip of water and their own breathing. "Whoa," Liam breathed, his voice hushed with awe. "This is incredible." Ben was already moving deeper into the cave, his light leading the way. "Come on, slowpokes. Let's see what's further in." They followed, the passage widening as they went. The floor was uneven, strewn with loose rocks and pebbles, and they had to watch their footing. After a few minutes, they entered a larger cavern, its ceiling lost in shadow. Ben shone his light upward, revealing a vast, echoing space. "Imagine being the first people to ever see this," he said, his voice filled with wonder. Untouched for thousands of years, Maya, however, was less enthusiastic. A growing unease had settled in her stomach, a prickling sensation on the back of her neck. "It's a little creepy, don't you think?" she said quietly. Ben chuckled. "Creepy? It's adventurous. It's exploring the unknown. What's creepy about that?" "I don't know," she replied, shivering despite herself. "Just a feeling, like we're not supposed to be here." Liam put a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's probably just your imagination, Maya. We're fine. We're together." Ben scoffed. "Yeah, relax. Besides, what's the worst that could happen? We get lost? We brought a map, compass, and plenty of juice. We can do this." He turned and continued deeper into the cave, his light swallowed by the darkness. "Come on, scaredy cats. Adventure awaits." Maya hesitated, her gaze sweeping the shadows at the edges of the cavern. The silence seemed to press in on her, heavy and expectant. Despite Liam's reassuring touch, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something they didn't understand, something that didn't want to be found. With a sigh, she followed, the beam of her headlamp cutting a small, fragile path through the encroaching darkness. Symbols and bones. The tunnel narrowed, forcing Ilara to hunch, the beam of her headlamp bouncing off the damp rock. "Think this is it?" she asked, her voice echoing strangely. "Has to be," Mark replied, his voice tight with anticipation. The scan showed a larger cavity beyond this bottleneck. He was right. As Ilara squeezed through, the tunnel opened abruptly into a vast chamber. The air here was noticeably colder, a damp chill that seeped into their bones. The walls, however, were not the smooth, water-worn surfaces they had grown accustomed to. Instead, they were covered in carvings. What the hell? Ben breathed, his light sweeping across the strange symbols. They were unlike anything Ilara had ever seen, geometric shapes interwoven with what looked like stylized animal figures, almost alien in their design. Some were etched deep into the rock, others were fainter, as if attempts had been made to erase them. "I don't like this," Ilara admitted, a knot forming in her stomach. These aren't natural. Mark, ever the pragmatist, dismissed her unease. Someone probably just got bored. Teenagers, maybe, happens all the time. He advanced further into the chamber, his lamp illuminating a smaller alcove to the side. He stopped dead. Okay, maybe not teenagers. The alcove was filled with bones. Not the neat, fossilized remains one might expect in a cave, but a chaotic jumble of animal skeletons, deer, raccoons, foxes, and what looked disturbingly like domesticated dogs. The air here was thick with the musty odor of decay, a cloying scent that made Ilara's eyes water. "What is this place?" Ben whispered, his bravado gone. Amidst the bones lay something else, a mangled cassette player, its plastic casing cracked and yellowed, a thin wire snaked out from its ruined interior, disappearing under a pile of vertebrae. As Ilara cautiously approached, she heard it, a faint, rhythmic tick, 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 emanating from the device. "It's still on," she said, her voice barely audible. "Or, partially on." Mark knelt beside her, his face pale. "Don't touch it." The ticking seemed to grow louder, resonating in the oppressive silence of the chamber. Ilara felt a prickling sensation on the back of her neck, a primal sense of dread that went beyond mere claustrophobia. This wasn't just a cave, it was something else, something darker. "We should go," Ben said, his voice trembling. "Now." Mark, usually so confident, didn't argue. He scrambled to his feet, his light jittering nervously across the bone-strewn floor. As they turned to leave, Ilara caught a glimpse of something moving in the shadows at the far end of the alcove, a fleeting impression of something dark and hunched, receding into the darkness. She blinked, and it was gone. "Did you see that?" she asked, her heart pounding. "See what?" Mark replied, already halfway back to the tunnel. "Never mind," Ilara said, forcing herself to move. "Let's just get out of here." Ben's disappearance. The main tunnel snaked onward, damp air thick with the musty scent of earth and something akin to crushed stone. Maya consulted the hand-drawn map, its lines blurring slightly in the beam of her headlamp. "Okay," she said, her voice echoing strangely. "According to Dad's notes, there should be a fork in about 50 feet. Ben, already 20 feet ahead, stopped abruptly. "Guys, check this out." Maya and Chloe hurried forward. A narrow opening, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through, branched off to the left. It wasn't marked on the map. The rock around the entrance was a different color, almost a bruised purple, and felt strangely smooth to the touch. "No way," Chloe said, shivering despite the humidity. "That looks wrong." Ben was already halfway inside, his lean frame disappearing into the darkness. "Come on, this could be it, guys. Untouched territory." "Ben, get back here," Maya snapped, her tone sharper than she intended. "Dad specifically warned us about unmarked passages. Stick to the map." He reappeared, grinning, his face dusted with fine, purple-tinged grit. "Relax, Maya. It's just a little peek. I'll be right back." "No, you won't," Chloe argued, stepping closer. "You'll get curious, and then you'll get lost. Stay with us, Ben, please." Her voice was unusually pleading. "Lost? Please. I have my wits about me." He squeezed past her, disappearing again. 5 minutes tops. The echo of his voice bounced back, mocking them. Maya sighed, running a hand through her tangled hair. 5 minutes that will feel like 5 hours. They waited in tense silence, the only sound, the steady drip, drip, drip of water from the cave ceiling. Chloe paced, her boots crunching on the loose gravel. Maya shone her light down the main tunnel, then back at the unmarked passage. 5 minutes stretched into 10, then 15. Okay, this isn't funny anymore, Maya said, her voice rising in pitch. Ben. Silence. Chloe swallowed hard. Maybe he just lost track of time? Lost track of time while exploring an unmarked tunnel he was explicitly told not to go into? Seriously, Chloe? Maya started toward the narrow opening. Ben, we're coming in. She squeezed through, followed closely by Chloe. The passage twisted and turned, the air growing colder, heavier. The purple rock felt slick beneath their boots. Ben. Maya called again, her voice echoing weakly. They moved deeper into the tunnel, their headlamps cutting through the oppressive darkness. The passage narrowed until they were forced to crawl, the rough rock scraping against their knees. The air smelled different here, metallic and sharp. Maya, I don't like this, Chloe whispered, her voice trembling. They crawled for what felt like an eternity. Then the passage opened into a small, circular chamber, empty. Maya stood, her heart pounding in her chest. Ben. Only the echo answered. They searched the chamber, every crack and crevice, but Ben was gone. There were no other exits, no signs of him having gone further. Just the cold, damp rock and the oppressive silence. Panic began to claw at Maya's throat. He couldn't have just vanished. Chloe's face was pale in the beam of her headlamp. We have to go back, get help. They scrambled back through the narrow passage, their movements clumsy and frantic. Emerging into the main tunnel, Maya shouted Ben's name again and again, her voice raw with fear. Nothing. The drip, drip, drip of water seemed to mock her, each drop a hammer blow against her skull. Ben was gone, and they were alone. The return. The headlamp's beam jittered in Maya's grasp, a visual echo of her racing pulse. Chloe's whimper was punctuated by the sharp bite of her nails against Maya's skin. Hours they'd spent shouting for Ben, their voices frayed threads against the suffocating silence. Just as hope began to erode, a sound, faint as a rustle of leaves, wafted from the cramped opening to their left. Not a reply, but a soft, wet gurgle. Maya swung her light. The passage was a tight squeeze, barely allowing passage for a single person. Ben, she called, her voice cracking despite her effort to steady it. Silence answered. Then, the gurgling again, closer now. Clutching her breath, Maya edged into the passage, Chloe glued to her back. The sight that greeted her forced a hasty retreat, nearly sending Chloe sprawling. Ben stood in a tiny niche, water pouring off him like a miniature waterfall, yet there was no river here, no spring, no dampness anywhere in the cavern, at least none they had encountered. He was soaked to the bone, his clothes clinging like a second skin, his dark hair plastered back, revealing a shockingly white face. But it wasn't the deluge that froze them. It was his eyes. Blank, unseeing, lost in some interior landscape, they stared straight ahead. Ben, Chloe cried, surging forward. What happened? Where were you? She reached, then hesitated, drawing back slightly at his touch. He felt like he'd been pulled from a glacier. He didn't so much as flicker an eyelash, didn't twitch, didn't acknowledge her presence in the slightest. He was a statue sculpted from dripping stone. Maya hauled Chloe back. Chloe, careful. Something isn't right. She circled him warily, the lamp beam painting across his vacant expression. His lips were slightly ajar, and a subtle shiver vibrated through him. The air around him felt colder, denser, humming with a strange, unsettling power. Ben, it's Maya. Can you hear me? She spoke deliberately, clearly, as if addressing a foreigner. Still nothing. A shard of pure fear, sharper than any icicle, pierced Maya's shock. This wasn't Ben. Not the Ben they knew and loved. Something had overtaken him in the depths, irrevocably altered him. "We need to get him out," Maya said, her voice a strained wire. "Now." Chloe, face ashen and tear-streaked, nodded dumbly. Together, they each took an arm and began the laborious task of guiding him back through the narrow space. He moved jerkily like a marionette with severed strings, his feet scraping along the uneven ground. The gurgling resonated with each step, a morbid percussion accompanying their ragged breathing. As they navigated the labyrinthine tunnels, the dripping intensified, a relentless, unnerving rhythm that seemed to bore into their minds. Maya repeatedly glanced at Ben, desperately searching for a spark of recognition, a glimmer of the boy he once was, but his gaze remained empty, fixed on some distant, unknowable horizon. The cave had transformed, now menacing, like some ancient beast observing them. Each shadow seemed to twist and writhe, every echo seemed to murmur secrets best left undisturbed. The skeletal remains they'd spotted earlier flashed across her mind's eye. What horrors had Ben been exposed to? They had to escape. They had to flee this stifling darkness and the chilling aura that clung to Ben like a second skin. They had to escape the incessant dripping dread. Maya lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. It was a familiar battle, trying to outlast insomnia. But tonight was different. It wasn't just her mind racing. A rhythmic drip, drip, echoed in the room. She sat up, heart pounding a dull thud against her ribs. The sound seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. She swung her legs over the edge of the bed, the wooden floor cool beneath her feet. Maybe a leaky pipe? Their house was old, riddled with quirks. She checked the bathroom, peering under the sink. Dry. She ran her hand along the ceiling, searching for dampness. Nothing. The sound continued, maddeningly consistent. Drip. Moving to the window, she pressed her ear against the glass, thinking it might be coming from outside. Rain, but the glass was dry. The dripping persisted, seemingly inside her head now, amplified by the silence of the night. Frustrated and unnerved, she grabbed her phone and scrolled through her contacts. Chloe. She hesitated, then pressed call. "Maya, what's wrong?" "It's late," Chloe answered, her voice thick with sleep. "Chloe, are you hearing anything weird?" Maya asked, trying to keep the tremor out of her voice. A pause, then, like what? Like a dripping sound, constant, like water, but not? Chloe was silent for a moment. "Oh my God, Maya. Yes, I thought I was losing it. It started last night. I can't find where it's coming from." Maya swallowed hard. "Me neither. It's driving me crazy. I don't like this, Chloe. I really don't like this." "Me neither," Chloe whispered. "It feels wrong." The line crackled with static. "Listen," Maya said, "I don't know what's happening, but we need to figure this out." "Okay," Chloe said, her voice gaining strength. "Okay, tomorrow, we'll talk." The dripping sound in Maya's room seemed to grow louder as she hung up. Meanwhile, a different kind of dread was building in the Walker household. Ben hadn't answered his phone all day. His parents had left multiple messages, each one more anxious than the last. He hadn't come down for dinner, and when his mother knocked on his door, there was no response. "Ben, honey, are you okay?" she called, her voice laced with concern. Silence. She tried the doorknob, locked. His father joined her, his brow furrowed. "That's not like him. He always answers." They exchanged worried glances. "Mr." Walker went to fetch a spare key, his hand trembling slightly. Sheriff Walker, a man weathered by years of small-town law enforcement, pulled up to the Walker residence. He'd known Ben since he was a kid, always a bright, responsible boy. But something was off. He'd seen the change in Ben after the cave incident. The boy had become withdrawn, almost haunted. He found Ben's parents standing on the porch, their faces etched with worry. "Walt, Mary, what's going on?" "It's Ben," Mary said, her voice choked with emotion. "He won't answer his door, and he hasn't returned our calls all day." Sheriff Walker nodded slowly. "I'll talk to him." He placed a reassuring hand on Mary's shoulder, then knocked firmly on Ben's door. "Ben, it's Sheriff Walker. Open up." Silence. He waited, then knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. He looked at Ben's parents, stepped back. He drew his service weapon, then holstered it. "Stand back, please. I'm going to kick the door in." Vanishing act. The morning sun, a pale imitation of warmth, barely penetrated the fog clinging to the hollows. Maya shivered, pulling her jacket tighter as she and Chloe crunched up Ben's gravel driveway. He hadn't answered his phone, hadn't responded to texts. A knot of unease tightened in Maya's stomach. Ben's truck was there, but the front door hung slightly ajar. "Ben?" Maya called, pushing it open further. The air inside was cold and damp, a stark contrast to the muggy morning. The scent of mildew hung heavy. "Ben, this isn't funny," Chloe said, her voice echoing strangely in the silent house. A trail of muddy footprints led from the back door, across the living room's worn rug, and stopped abruptly near the hallway leading to the bedrooms. Wet, dark impressions on the faded floral pattern. Maya felt a prickle of fear crawl up her spine. It was exactly like they described. "He wouldn't just leave the door open like this," Chloe whispered, her face pale. She followed Maya's gaze to the footprints. "This is wrong." They searched the house, calling Ben's name, their voices growing increasingly frantic. His wallet and keys were on the kitchen counter. His cell phone lay silent on the charger. He was gone. The sheriff arrived an hour later, his face grim. Walker, a mountain of a man with eyes that missed nothing, surveyed the scene with practiced efficiency. He questioned Maya and Chloe separately, his voice calm but probing. "He just vanished," Maya explained, her voice trembling, like the others. Walker's gaze hardened. "The others were rumors, Maya. This is a missing person. We'll find him." But Maya saw the doubt flicker in his eyes. That night, sleep evaded Maya. Every creak of the old house, every rustle of leaves outside her window, sent shivers down her spine. She finally drifted off towards dawn, only to be jolted awake by a piercing scream. "Chloe." Maya threw on her clothes and raced next door, her heart hammering against her ribs. Chloe's front door was wide open, the porch light casting a sickly yellow glow on the scene. Inside, Chloe's parents stood in the living room, their faces etched with terror. "She's gone," Chloe's mother sobbed. "Gone, just like." The hallway was a mirror image of Ben's house. Wet footprints leading from Chloe's bedroom to the living room, stopping abruptly. But there was something else. Scrawled on Chloe's bedroom window, etched into the condensation, was a crude drawing of a cave entrance. The same symbol Maya had seen carved into the walls of the Blackwater Caves. Panic seized Maya. This wasn't random. This was targeted. This was personal. The dripping started that night, faint, rhythmic, maddening. It echoed in the hollows of her mind, a constant reminder of the darkness that had taken her friends. She felt exposed, watched, as if something were circling, waiting. The cave was calling to her. Sheriff Walker returned the next day, his face drawn. "We found some footprints near the old Blackwater entrance," he said, his voice low. "They match the prints in Ben's house." He looked at Maya, his gaze intense. "Tell me everything you know about those caves, Maya. Everything." Return to Blackwater. The last time she'd seen Ben, his eyes had been vacant, reflecting only the sickly green glow of the emergency flares. Now, the faces of Liam and Sarah swam before her eyes, each ashen and hollowed as Ben's had become. She couldn't let Blackwater claim them too. Maya pushed herself up from the cot in her aunt's spare room, the worn springs groaning in protest. Sleep offered no escape, only a twisted replay of their descent into the earth, their laughter echoing into panicked screams. She had to go back. The thought sent a shiver crawling down her spine, a stark reminder of the oppressive darkness and the suffocating silence she'd sworn never to endure again. But sitting here, paralyzed by fear, was no longer an option. She found her aunt's old camping pack in the attic, dusted it off, and laid out the essentials: a high-powered headlamp, a compass, a topographical map of the Blackwater region, a sturdy climbing rope, and several protein bars. She hesitated before adding the heavy iron poker from beside the fireplace, its cold weight a grim comfort against the unknown. The drive was a blur of gray highway and looming trees, each mile a step closer to her nightmare. The air grew colder as she neared Blackwater, carrying the scent of damp earth and something else, something acrid and ancient, like decay clinging to the very stones. The entrance to the cave was, as she remembered, an ugly gash in the hillside, its maw dripping with condensation. The sun, already sinking below the horizon, cast long, distorted shadows that danced like restless spirits. Maya took a deep breath, the frigid air stinging her lungs. This was it. She flicked on her headlamp, the beam cutting through the gloom. The familiar smell of mildew and bat guano assaulted her nostrils. The silence was different this time, heavier, pregnant with a watchful dread. It pressed against her, a tangible weight trying to push her back. Each step echoed unnaturally loud in the claustrophobic space. She marked her path with small reflectors, their tiny gleams her only reassurance in the oppressive dark. The air grew thick and heavy, making each breath a conscious effort. She followed the path they had taken, a route now etched in her memory. The walls were slick with moisture, cold to the touch. Strange formations loomed out of the darkness, grotesque shapes sculpted by water and time. She passed the narrow crevice where Ben had first disappeared, the air around it still clinging to a peculiar chill. Deeper she went, the dripping sound growing more pronounced, no longer a random occurrence, but a rhythmic pulse, a macabre metronome counting down to something she didn't want to imagine. The symbols they had found, crude carvings etched into the stone, reappeared, seeming more malevolent now, their lines twisting and writhing in the beam of her light. Fear clawed at her throat, but she pressed on, driven by a desperate hope and a fierce determination to bring her friends home. The underground lake. The insistent plink, plink, plink burrowed into Maya's skull, a relentless metronome counting out the long seconds of her solitude. Tonight, it was amplified, invasive, a beckoning from the depths. Curiosity, or perhaps a morbid fascination, propelled her further into the cavern's maw than ever before. The flashlight beam trembled, a fragile spear against the encroaching dark. A cloying miasma of wet stone and something indefinably primeval thickened the air. The tunnel constricted, forcing her into a crouch. The slick walls, cold as a tomb, brushed against her clothes. A shiver, ancient and instinctive, prickled her skin, yet she pressed onward. The dripping had swelled to a percussive roar when, without warning, the passage emptied into breathtaking immensity, A vast cavern unfolded before her, illuminated by an unearthly phosphorescent glow. The source lay hidden, but the light seemed to bloom from the water itself, a subterranean lake, utterly still, filling the chamber. Its surface, a mirror to unseen radiance, offered an illusion of bottomless depth, a spectacle that both captivated and filled her with dread. It was a scene conjured from forgotten lore, exquisite and profoundly disturbing. And there, immersed to their knees in the shimmering water, stood Ben and Chloe. No greeting, no gesture. Only stillness, their faces pale and serene, their eyes fixed on hers. Damp fabric clung to their limbs, their hair hung like leaden ropes. They were altered, subtly, fundamentally, yet undeniably her friends. They offered an invitation, a languid, deliberate sway of their hands, urging her to join them in the spectral lake. Vertigo assailed Maya, reality blurred. Was this a phantasm, born of fear and loneliness? Every instinct screamed at her to flee, to scramble back to the familiar dark. But her feet were leaden, her gaze ensnared. The silence deepened, punctuated only by the reverberating drips, now seemingly emanating from the heart of the lake itself. An irresistible current tugged at her, an urge to obey, to wade into that incandescent water and stand beside Ben and Chloe in their silent vigil. The very air thrummed with an inscrutable energy, a siren's call poised to overwhelm her will. Then, a sound from the entrance shattered the trance, the crunch of displaced gravel, a muttered oath. "Sheriff Walker, Maya? You in there, Maya?" His voice, raw with anxiety, echoed within the cave. Ben and Chloe remained unmoving, their unwavering eyes holding hers, their beckoning hands insistent. Sheriff Walker's voice intensified, closer now. "Maya, I'm coming in." Maya wrenched her gaze from her friends, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Sheriff Walker, rescue, a chance to sever herself from this nightmare. But to abandon Ben and Chloe. The choice was agonizing, a conflict raging between terror and devotion. She could stay, succumb to the lake's allure and whatever awaited her within. Or she could retreat, forsaking her friends, and embrace the dubious safety of the world above. Her breath caught in her throat. She had to choose. Now,